It's 6:37. Good morning to you. Time to have a look through the papers this morning, and talking us through them today, former advisor to Michael Gove, Charlie Rowley, and writer and commentator Candice Holdsworth. Good morning to you both.
Good morning.
Morning.
Candice, let's start with the front of the Times, should we?
Yes.
Who's being told to get back to basics?
Well, so James Cleverly, the new Home Secretary, he has just chaired a new national police conference, and he's told police chiefs that they need to start more community policing. So, and also responding to things like shoplifting, burglary, and basically just having more of a visible presence on the streets, which they haven't. I mean, the criticism of him, though, is that, well, the Conservatives have cut police numbers, so it's actually quite hard to have the number of police officers they want. And also, you know, what often happens is that police, PCSOs, the police support community officers, they get diverted when there's something else going on. So there's sort of this split between reactive policing and proactive policing, where you're, you know, just pounding the pavement, looking around. It's interesting, he's coming out with this rhetoric, it's strong rhetoric, but I think that the criticism is fair. How practical is it? If the police numbers are cut and they need to respond to emergencies, what do they do? You can take a hard line and you can be seen to be taking a hard line, but how do you actually achieve what you want to achieve?
Yeah. Charlie?
Yeah, no, I think it's really important because, you know, local policing and particularly those PCSOs are vital to local communities because they are the intelligence, they are the boots on the ground that can sort of, you know, refer things and feed things up to those police officers. I mean, the government will say there's 20,000 new bobbies on the beat, which is obviously a good thing. But Candice is absolutely right. You know, if people don't feel as though the community is safe, if they feel that crime's going up, even if it's being cut, because they can't see the visibility of those police officers on the ground, then that's what causes problems, and that's what makes people sort of you know, look to alternative governments.
Here's one for you this morning. What do you make of PCSOs? And no disrespect, and if you are one, you know, it's got to be a tough job, and you know, you're getting out there and doing the job. However, when I see one, I still think it's a sort of half policeman.
Yeah, lacking in authority.
Do you know what I mean? I wouldn't. If I had a big issue, I wouldn't go running to one. I'd run to a police officer.
Yes.
But not to a PCSO. And it's no disrespect to them, but you know, they haven't got the badge.
Yes, yeah. Why have that distinction? Is it even necessary? Just have police officers.
Make police officers.
Yes,
Well,
yes.
and a lot of PCSOs do move into policing. It's sort of the stepping stone, but then you have to either replace those PCSOs as a sort of, you know, an entry sort of role for people that want to get involved in policing, or you're right, you do the training, just become a police officer.
Sort of train them and convert them all. If they're, you know, if they're good enough to do the job, make them police officers.
Yeah.
Yes, yeah.
I do feel comforted by their presence, though. You know, when I see them at train stations, especially late at night, I do feel safer. But I'd feel even safer if it was a police officer.
See, that's the thing. I guess I'm not overly familiar quite what authority they
Something's
have.
better than nothing.
Yes.
Quite what they can do. It can't be as much as a police officer, otherwise.
No.
Be a police officer.
No.
So I don't know if you've got a view on that, or if you're a PCSO or a police officer, get in touch. We'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah.
Charlie, can we talk migrants on the front of the Daily Express?
Yes, this is James Cleverly that was sat before the Home Affairs Select Committee yesterday talking about 5,600 to be exact, illegal migrants have been shortlisted for Rwanda. Now, he was very good to, I think, talk about a number of issues and a number of things that the government's doing, not just focus on Rwanda and taking these flights off the ground. So he was talking about the returns agreement that we've got with Albania. He's talked about the returns agreement that he's hoping to get with many other countries to sort of, I think, downplay the overemphasis on Rwanda, just in case, I think, perhaps if a flight doesn't get off the ground, he can be able to point to many other things that the government's doing to sort of curb illegal migration and get it under control. But, you know, he said there's no cap on the amount of funding that can go into the project. There's no cap on the numbers of people that might be deported. But as I say, all those numbers are dependent on all of the other things that the Home Office are looking at.
But he also admitted that numbers could be very low, didn't he, this week? There does seem to be some confusion. I mean, we're talking about over 5,000 in the Daily Express, but yesterday it could be as little as 100.
Yeah, that's absolutely right, and that it goes back to all the other measures that you have, returns agreement with other countries, and so if you're able to sort of stop the boats coming over in the first place, if you're able to stop people migrating through mainland Europe into France, then into the southeast of the UK, that's one aspect of it. It's the returns agreement with Albania, it's the returns agreement with the other countries that it can secure, which will then limit the number of people that you actually then have to send to Rwanda.
It's the question, isn't it? Will it provide that disincentive? Because that's ultimately what they're saying. Is it about the numbers, or it's just a disincentive? You know that if you come into Britain illegally, the chances of you actually being able to settle here are very low. And people have said it won't stop people anyway. They'll still take the chance. But I wonder if that's true.
Yeah, well, I would wonder on that, because, I mean, the idea is they would be processed in Rwanda, isn't it? So if you come over here on a small boat, you will be picked up, shipped off to the airport and flown out to Africa.
Yes, yeah.
And then, if you are processed and able to come back, well, that's a different kettle of fish, isn't it?
I know. People don't... I think a lot of people aren't aware of what international law is as well. The fact of the matter is, Britain has to provide a safe third country. If you can't return them to their home country, you have to find somewhere else for them to go. So if the Rwanda deal doesn't work out, you need to find somewhere else. And I don't think people are fully aware of that.
Yeah, and I think it's also worth mentioning, look, the numbers of people that are coming over, I mean, they're down by a third. The Prime Minister will keep telling us, the numbers of people coming over in small boats are down by a third. And also, we think we've got a problem in the UK. I mean, we do have a problem in the UK with illegal migration, but, look at Italy, look at Germany, look at France, they've got it sort of, 10 times as many people sort of entering, as say, Europe than we do. So, we're getting better at it. I think, the processing of that backlog, those claims, getting those numbers down, I think is something that the government will want to step up its comms a bit more to tell the public that it is dealing with it. But, so far as you can still see the people coming over in a small boat, then people will question whether the policy is actually working.
Well, it's a very difficult issue to tackle, isn't it? Candice, should we talk about Alan Bates, who has become a household name, hasn't he, really, after this ITV drama, Alan Bates versus the Post Office. But it's now been revealed he's actually turned down the government's compensation offer. Tell us a bit more.
Yeah, just the ongoing saga. So, yes, like you explained, Alan Bates, who's just become so famous through this very powerful ITV drama, The Telegraph is reporting that the government has made an offer to him, and I think there's about 4,000 other people who are eligible for this compensation, and he has rejected it. He said it's only about a sixth of what he was offered. He's described it as offensive and cruel and derisory. And the government has said, OK, well, you can come back to us and we can talk about it if you don't feel you're being offered what you're owed. But it just feels like this is never ending. I mean,
I'll tell you what annoys me about this is the government should have more sense, actually, that this is... And often when there's compensation and things, it is a negotiation. This shouldn't be a negotiation. No. This should be here's a very large cheque with our apologies.
Yes.
And let's try and claim it back off Fujitsu.
Yeah.
Not this negotiating down to the lowest point.
Well, this is what they went through before. I mean, now that we've got huge public backing for it, I mean, you would think that they would just rectify the injustice. I mean, Fujitsu have said that they'll also contribute some, but we don't know what. And these people have had their lives ruined. I mean, ruined, financially destroyed. And there's a moral thing there. There's a moral element to this.
I think you hit the nail right on the head there. When Fujitsu must pay, the Post Office must stump up some cash as well. It's not relying on the UK taxpayer, because this is going to be huge sums of money to all of those people that Candice was saying. Lives have been turned upside down. People remortgaged their homes. They lost all of their savings. People took their own lives because of the scandal and the way in which they were treated. So it is an absolute horror and a shocking story, a total miscarriage of justice for those people that were wrongly convicted. The idea that they're not getting the compensation that they deserve and pronto, I think, will just infuriate the public.
Why do you think this happens then, Charlie? I mean, is this the dreaded sort of civil service who are slightly taken away from things and just go, right, what's the lowest figure we can get away with? Is that what happens?
Well, I think there'll be, you will probably task someone or a team to sort of say, OK, right, we've got a problem here, so we need to fix it. This is what we need to do. So overturn the convictions, offer a compensation package, and then a team will probably go away and draw up a best and worst case or a range of options of what to then present to the government ministers to say, well, this is what you can or can't do. That will take time. Now, they've obviously presented a figure to Mr Bates, and they've probably gone through individual cases. That will take time because some people might be more disproportionately disproportionately affected than others, depending on how much money that they would have lost, or how much how long they went through the criminal justice system wrongly. Depends, how much compensation that they should be matched by. So it'll be quite technical and clunky.
But for it to be 1/6 of what he was asking for, which you can't imagine is the type of man who's put a claim in for £20 million.
No. Yes, and they don't say exactly what the figures are, but clearly he's very disappointed. One of the things that I found quite disturbing about this story is they said when we were ordered to pay back the money, what happened to that money? And they said it may have even gone into bonuses for executives, which is just so shocking. The way that this was handled and mismanaged so terribly.
And I still think we haven't heard enough from Paula Venables, who handed back her CBE after about a week's worth of front page, appearing on the front page, so under pressure there. But we still haven't heard from the post office bosses as to what went wrong, what they knew about the scandal at the time, and what they're doing to rectify it.
No, she hasn't.
Davy's gone very quiet as well.
Well, he has, but she hasn't said anything either about her. What did she get when she left the post office? £5 million bonus or something?
Something like that. Yes, it's extraordinary. Rewarding people for clearly absolute failure.
Yeah, millions of pounds worth in a pension as well. OK, Charlie, let's have a look at XL Bully, shall we? Because the deadline is now passed for people to register their XL bullies. And now the public are being asked to call 101 if they see an unmuzzled bully.
Yes, it's an interesting tack, because I'm not quite sure what you do once you've spotted one in a park, maybe 1 minute, and then they'll be gone the next. So
to be honest, I wouldn't know.
No.
What an XL bully was compared to a similar breed.
Well, exactly. And I remember there was a similar story, I think we were talking about a couple of weeks ago, where people weren't sure whether they've actually got an XL bully and whether they had to register them or not. So there's a bit of confusion in that system. But there are about 40,000 who have beaten the ban, I think it says on the front page. But these are dogs that are, have been proven to be dangerous. They have caused misery and sort of harm to people, the attacks that have taken place either in parks and public spaces. So there's clearly been a real effort to try and curtail this particular breed and obviously make sure that there is a minimum safety requirement for those that do have this breed of dog. But you're right, I mean, I couldn't spot the difference and I wouldn't know what an XL bully is, but it's clearly something that obviously the public are being asked to do.
Well, it's been difficult, hasn't it? For that reason, I think it's a combination of about 6 different breeds to get to an XL bully. So it's actually quite difficult to define exactly what an XL bully is.
Yes, and there's so much crossbreeding going on, and I think it's very unregulated, maybe up until now, this breeding industry. I must say, slightly unpopular opinion, I've started to feel sorry for XL bully dogs and their owners, because they're all just so worried about their dogs and they love their dogs so much. And I'm not naive about it. I'm not naive about what these dogs can do, but I think it's just my natural sympathy for dogs.
Yeah, well, look, I'm with you on that, and I do think I think it's right that action is taken. I think you've got to be careful with the number of attacks they've been, and if they do attack, it seems to be full on. But I'm not for destroying them. Yes, get them licensed, muzzled in public. Fair enough. I sort of think that's fair enough. But destroying them, I have an issue with.
No.
Well, there were some quite cute pictures that you displayed there, which makes them sort of look slightly harmless. But there's also a question about the owners. Are they bad dogs, or are they just bad owners who've let their dogs sort of
such a mix.
Run wild?
Because some of the people I know who love these sorts of dogs, they're very gentle, kind people. They feel like the dogs are misunderstood, which makes them a bit naive sometimes as well. And then, of course, you get just the terribly irresponsible owners who use them, to look tough, and they don't train them properly or restrain them.
Well, they are bred for aggression, so we're told. But as you said, I mean, the ones we're showing pictures of clearly look absolutely adorable.
A bit like us.
Bred for aggression.
No, we look adorable.
Candice, this is a very distressing story, isn't it? It's the Crossbows stalker scandal, as it's being described in the front page of the Metro.
Yes, so I found this fascinating, and I don't know if you guys had the same reaction, but as soon as the story came out, I thought, what will this person's history be? Because I think we're all used to now, if there's some random incident where someone does something just crazy, we all think, what have they done before? There's usually a string of incidents before that. And it's emerged that this man, this 30-year-old man, Bryce Hodgson, he was a convicted stalker. and he was trying to break into the woman's house that he'd been stalking. And even though he'd been convicted for this stalking, and he was on a restraining order, he was only given community service. He didn't really need to report to a probation officer. Neighbours reported that he was a heavy drug user. He behaved quite strangely. And if you look at some of these other more well-known cases, like Valdo Calocane, for instance, it always seems like they were displaying alarming behaviour, but no one really got on top of it until they did something really dangerous.
But, I mean, there would appear to be... I mean, you don't know from this angle, do you? But there could well be a mental health issue here, which then begs the question, why is that not being addressed?
Well, I think that's the key, and that's absolutely right. You know, there's clearly questions for the criminal justice system, for the CPS and for the police. You know, someone who has been convicted, and exactly like Mr. Calcane, you know, who had been wanted by the police, that convicted crimes before, you know, obviously not someone that the police were keeping tabs on when they should have been. And, you know, the idea that, you know, someone who, as Candice was saying, has got a criminal conviction was able just to effectively get a slap on the wrist and then go and try and break into this woman's home again, armed, to cause maximum damage. I think, you know, questions will be asked. The public will not feel safe.
Is this down? That's back to where we started, isn't it? Police numbers.
Yes.
To an extent.
Yes, yeah. And also, you know, for me as well, like you were saying about the mental health component, you know, what's going on with psychiatric services? Are they understaffed? Are they underfunded? I mean, with Valdo Calocane, I mean, he was not medically compliant. He wasn't turning up to meet with the psychiatrists and the doctors. And they're highly reliant on people being able to do that. Otherwise, they have to, you know, take stronger action, like section people, for instance.
There should be easier sanctions.
Yes.
If someone is a potential threat and has been identified as such, but is getting treatment, well, if they stop that treatment...
I agree, especially if they've displayed violent behaviour. I mean, some people, you know, they can be psychotic, but they're not a danger to anyone else. But he had attacked numerous people, and I saw one psychiatrist interviewed on television talking about it, and he said, well, you know, you couldn't really anticipate such an escalation of violence. I'm like, well, maybe not such an escalation of violence, but you could predict that he would attack somebody. So I think that's something we really need to look at, because it's not the first time it's happened.
Yeah, and in this case, I mean, we're getting new details all the time, but Bryce Hodgson had been reportedly sending messages to the girl in question, the lady in question, sexually explicit messages, just describing what he'd like to do to her. So again, you could almost predict that pattern of behaviour. And I do think in stalking cases, restraining orders often just aren't enough.
Really?
I mean, if you're looking at threats of violence and threats of sexual violence, just saying you need to stay away from this person for 5 years, it's not enough.
They can't.
For somebody who potentially is mentally unwell.
Totally. You're absolutely right. Those restraining orders aren't enough, and it's that, you know...
But that's the go-to, it seems.
Yes, and I think there needs to be, you know, either tougher sanctions or tougher enforcement on those people. But it's bringing together all of those services. So it's bringing together, you know, whether it's mental health units, whether it's the police, whether it's schools. Everybody seems to be overstretched at times, which allows these particular individuals to fall through the cracks. But, you know, you've got to ask yourself, you know, how many more cases are we going to hear about people that have been monitored or should have been monitored but weren't, and then have been able to go and commit crime after crime, time after time.
Yeah. OK, look, we've got to leave it there. Charlie, Candice, we'll see you a little bit later on. Thank you very much indeed.
Ada McGibbon, how's your weather?